You are listening to the One Day at a Time Recovery Podcast. On this podcast, my guests share their stories of alcoholism, addiction, and how they recovered so that you can too. My hope is that you find the inspiration and resources you need to let go of what's holding you back so that you can transform into the person you were always meant to be. Ready? Here we go. Hey friend, welcome to the podcast. In case you're new here, my name is Arlina, and I just celebrated 30 years of sobriety. I'm also the founder of Sober Life School, where I've helped hundreds of women to quit drinking and create a life they love. Today, I'll be joined by Christina Galbato. She is a very successful entrepreneur who got her start as a travel blogger, and now she helps content creators to build profitable, long-lasting, and impactful businesses. She's coming on today to share her story of becoming alcohol-free. We talk about what it was like to be a high-functioning alcoholic with a very large public community while privately struggling with alcohol. We talk about how she recovered, going public with her story, and how she stays grounded in the face of public opinion. I found her to be very genuine, very smart, and incredibly courageous. I think she is such a great example of what it means to break the stigma of addiction by recovering out loud. I'm really excited to share this conversation with you, so without further delay, please enjoy this episode with Christina. Well, Christina, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a long time coming for this podcast interview. Entirely my fault.
No. You are worth the wait. I understand. You
Oh, I'm
are
excited.
super busy. You have a very successful business that I'm sure is super demanding. I will, want to talk a little bit about what it's like to be so high functioning and
Hmm.
and how we got here. But
Yeah.
I always like to start with this little game I call the lightning
Hmm.
round, which is actually very
Okay.
slow. But when you first started your alcohol-free journey, were there any books
Hmm.
that really spoke to you or helped you?
Ooh, that is a good question. Um, yes, I in the beginning found it incredibly helpful to learn about like the neuroscience behind what I was experiencing. So I remember in particular there was this book called Never Enough. I think it's called
Mm.
Never Enough: The Neuroscience of Addiction, and that was really, really helpful for me.
Oh my gosh. So I'm friends with Dr. Judy Grisel.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and she is
Wow.
going to be ecstatic that you.
That book really, really, really helped me. It
So
was
I,
something, it makes it feel more normal when you understand, like, okay, there's a reason for what's happening in my brain right now.
yeah, I really feel like that looking at this through the lens of science kind of depersonalizes it, right? It's like, oh, of course I got addicted. It's an addictive substance. And look what it did to my dopamine reward circuit and all
Hmm.
that stuff. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And then it makes you a really annoying person where you're like, oh, well, I'm feeling a little off because my hedonic set point is like, you know what I mean? And you're like, just so annoying.
But it's true.
Exactly.
Yeah, another really good one that talks about that is Dopamine Nation, Dr. Anna
Yes.
Lemke. Yeah.
Molecule of More also is really good.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Molecule
Molecule of More
More.
is really good.
All
Yep.
right, we got some good books. I always love front loading the episode with resources. So those are I'm a total
100%.
book nerd, so those are
Same.
really good. Um, do you have a regular self-care practice that supports your sobriety, whether it's like a morning thing, a weekly routine? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's probably not something that's super regimented at this point. In the beginning, it was definitely different, but now I would say that having like slower mornings is probably something that's really important to me, which I think anybody could benefit from. Just really taking like an hour, hour and a half of your day to like get some movement in first thing, sun in your eyes, have some sort of gratitude practice, which I think again doesn't need to be regimented as far as like sitting down with a journal, but it could be like just walking outside and thinking about what you're grateful for. So I always try to kind of do some sort of like internal, just like peaceful setting up for the day, gratitude practice at the beginning. Another thing that has helped me a lot, and all of this is really just to make sure that like I'm starting every single day with like a clear head, and the best possible version of myself that I can be. Um, but something that's helped me a lot actually is turning my phone on airplane mode before I go to bed. And then only after my morning routine, turning it on, because I think all of us can relate to the fact that as soon as you open social media first thing in the morning, you're like, your rest of your day is going to be a
Gone.
dumpster fire, absolute dumpster fire. So that has helped me a lot.
No,
And
that's
then
really
also,
smart.
yeah, at the end of the day too, just sort of reflecting on like, and not even journaling, it doesn't have to be journaling, just reflecting back on the day and how I operated as a person that day and the ways in which I did or didn't align with kind of my most ideal self. And I think it is kind of in that like constant reflection where you can maintain like emotional sobriety and who you want to be.
Girl, that is huge. That is a big deal.
Yeah.
Um, so you just celebrated 3 years, is that right? April
Yeah, in
12th.
April. Yeah. Thank
Congratulations.
you.
Yes, my
Wild.
milestone is we share a month of milestones. Mine's April as well, so it was
Oh,
a good month.
amazing.
Yeah, it was a
Amazing.
good
Yeah,
month to
good
get
month.
sober. But
Yes.
yeah, so it's been 3 years. What's one thing you wish you would have known right from the start?
That not only will you survive this, that your life will be 1 million times better than you can ever begin to imagine. Because I'm sure
That
you
is
can
so
relate to
true.
this, that when you first get sober, realize you have to, you think your life is like completely over and there's going to be no joy left, you know?
The fun is over. Yes.
Yeah, the fun has just begun. So,
Yeah, I was 25 when I quit drinking, and I was like, how am I not going to drink champagne at my wedding? Like that was a
oh
real
yeah.
concern.
It's a grieving process of your identity, you know, but then you can kind of have the opportunity to birth something completely new and beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll dive into a little bit of the grieving process later. But always so curious about, you know, childhood because that typically sets the stage for later. And I heard your interview with Mary and
Mm.
Mary Tilson, and it was so interesting to hear that you had a 0 on the ACEs score.
Hmm.
So tell me a little bit about your family of origin.
Yeah. And before I say this too, I think that this is where a lot of people who end up needing to get sober can struggle, especially if they did not have any sort of like big T traumas, is they sort of minimize what they're going through and sort of
Yeah,
like gaslight their way out of like, oh, I don't have a problem because I didn't have a traumatic childhood. Like this
right.
couldn't possibly be an issue for me. I had an incredible childhood. My family is amazing. I've never felt, you know, financially unstable or emotionally unstable. Certainly, I think there are ways that maybe I wanted certain types of love from my parents that they didn't know how to give, and I internalized that. Um, but my childhood was very stable. I think for me, a lot of where my use came from was as like a coping mechanism for a lot of anxiety, a lot of discomfort in who I was. A lot of attachment related stuff in relationships has been like 90% of the work that I've had to do over the last 3 years. And so I've always sort of looked externally at ways to like soothe things that were going on inside of me, whether it was like men, validation, work, material substances, self-harm for a while in high school, alcohol, drugs came into the mix, all of that stuff to just sort of like do anything to soothe that like discomfort internally that I was feeling.
Yeah.
So my childhood was, you know, pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that a lot, the anxiety piece, like the drugs and
Mhm.
alcohol soothes like some sort of, they call it restless, irritable, discontent type of
Yes.
feelings. How old were you when you
Yeah.
first started drinking?
I was 16, I want to say. 15,
That sounds about
16.
right.
Yeah.
Aren't
Yeah,
we
that
all?
started real early.
Yeah,
Yeah.
14, 16. Yeah,
Exactly. And then
high
that's
school.
like the yeah, that's the problem too. It's like when your brain is forming, you learn like if I drink this, then I feel better. Then I feel like I belong. And then, you learn
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that is such a rough age. I feel like in a lot of ways, like alcohol and drugs sort of help me survive because that is such a rough time.
100%. 100%. There's
And
a
oh, go ahead.
I was going to quickly say, I don't know if you're familiar with Gabor Mate, but a
Hmm.
lot of what he talks about is, what is not what's wrong with the addiction, but what was right about it. Because
Mm,
alcohol and drugs, we look at addiction as like a bad thing, but actually for a little bit at the beginning, they serve a purpose and they do actually help us until they don't.
yeah, until
So
they don't.
it's very
Yeah.
interesting.
He also says, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain,
Yeah.
right? It's like, and we're so hard on ourselves for really their survival strategies that we pick
Hmm.
up,
Absolutely.
but they work for a while and like you said, until they don't. So
Absolutely.
when did you decide, when did your drinking, obviously you didn't drink daily at 16 or anything like that, but when did you notice your drinking escalating?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, from the beginning, I was not a healthy drinker. I had no off button from like the very first drink that I had. I'm like
Same.
always so jealous. I'm like, why do you guys have this like button where you can just stop drinking? I don't get it. Didn't come with that feature. So anyway, my relationship with alcohol was very unhealthy from the beginning.
Okay.
Went to college, was in Greek life, found, a group of people that drank like I did, where like reckless behavior and like
Woohoo.
horrible decision making was like encouraged and like laughed at and all of
Yeah.
that stuff. And so that sort of got me into a deeper hole, but I definitely, I was part of a group where it felt normal. And then after college, I moved to New York City and that behavior, like the party kind of atmosphere just continued. But then the party seemed to slow down for everybody else when I was like, let's say 24, 25. Everyone's kind of moving on with their lives, focusing on their career, which of course we'll get into, I was as well. But the drinking definitely just continued. And I think the thing also is that a lot of the reason why I started drinking was because of anxiety, but as you can relate to, the things that you do or that happen when you're using or drinking um, just create shame that keeps you drinking, right? So like
Yeah.
that's sort of what was going on around like 25, 26. I was in a relationship I was super unhappy with, very unhappy with myself in general. And I would say around like 2018 to 2021 was when things became more of like, not only did I not have an off button when I went out, but it became more of like a daily thing. So like around 5 p.m. it would start, bottle and half a night. I found myself just doing ridiculous things. Like I would go and buy, first of all, I could never keep like any excess alcohol in the house whatsoever. It was like whatever is there is going to get drunk, drinking, whatever the
No
term
such
is.
thing as excess alcohol.
Yeah, no, I can't have it around because I'm gonna drink it. So like I would go to the
Yeah.
wine store and like buy what I needed like 10 minutes before they closed. So that way there was no option of like going back. Or if I knew I had a meeting, I
Oh.
would pour like half down the drain. Or like I just knew about myself that I didn't have any sort of off button. And that's when I started noticing that behavior is when it became scary. Also became scary when I realized I was hiding and lying about things, my drinking. Um, and my work was impacted to a certain degree, but we can talk more about the nature of my work where it wasn't impacted too much. I was very much functional.
Hmm.
But so yeah, 2018 to 2021 is when it really became more of like a daily thing.
Became daily. Did you have
Mhm.
anybody in your life that was expressing concern? Did your parents, maybe they didn't see it, or your friends?
My parents didn't see, my family didn't see the daily stuff, and my friends didn't see the daily stuff. But certainly, my mom in particular would express concern over just the times that she's been around me when I was drinking. So it had been mentioned to me a number of times, like
Mm.
people's concern for sure. My boyfriend, who I was mostly living with at the time, definitely expressed concern, but he had a lot going on, like himself personally, where it wasn't. Um, too big of an issue. So it was very much an isolated, very
Mhm.
lonely experience for me towards the end, I would say, where I was sort of just battling myself.
That must have been, I mean, that is such a difficult period. Just that I think there's something about us as, alcoholics where
Mhm.
loneliness is like the worst type of pain that you can have.
Yeah, it's really difficult. And even now when I start to like self-isolate for whatever reason, that's like when
Mhm.
my, alarm signals start to go off a little bit. Like
The red flag.
let's not
Yeah.
do that. Yeah, but talking about it, it feels like a lifetime ago. It's
Yeah.
crazy. It feels like talking about a different person.
Well, it's understandable. Like we isolate out of a need to feel safe,
Hmm.
right? Like that's the
Yep.
instinct, right? But
Yeah,
when we isolate, it could get to a very dark place. Like they say,
exactly.
it's just all bad to be alone
Exactly.
with me, myself, and I
Yeah, that's not a good
sometimes.
thing. Not a good thing.
Um, and I know I wanted to ask you to share that story of your spiritual moment when you
Yeah.
like it's so funny because like when I first got sober, I was
Hmm.
completely self-centered but incapable of like self-examination. And I think a lot of us have like those wake-up calls where we just get this glimpse of reality that sort of breaks the denial.
Yeah.
And I love your story about the wine glasses in
Hmm.
Tulum.
Yeah, and that's where, man, when I think about this story because I'm friends with or know of a lot of people that just keep trying and trying and trying and trying to get sober.
Yeah.
And I definitely had tried many times, but that's why I kind of do believe in that like higher power spiritual moment
Yeah.
because it clicked in that moment. And it was like no going back type of thing. And so
Mhm.
like for there to be that intersectionality of like me being like at the bottom and like most willing to listen and like the kind of timing and message from the universe and the circumstance that really like pushed me over that edge is so like just divine. And yeah, but anyway, so this was February 2021. I went to Tulum with a friend. Well, I was alone for the first like half of it. And I was like, I'm gonna drink green juices on the beach all day. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the term like doing a geographic, but I'm like the queen of doing
Uh-huh.
geographics. So I'm like, if I just like go to this other place, like my whole life is gonna change and I can just like escape myself. Like
Yeah.
love a good geographic. Anyway, so I was like Tulum, I've had all these dreams for myself. And then I was in this one hotel before I met up with a friend, and they wouldn't bring me just like a bottle of wine. They would do it by the glass. So, of course, I'm room servicing glass after glass after glass after glass of wine. And then to make a long story short, when I was checking out, I was, at the front desk and the guy gave me the receipt and it had all these like glasses of wine on it and I like signed it, whatever, started heading to the taxi and the guy calls me back and he's like, we forgot things from last night. And I came back and saw a list of like all the wine glasses that I'd ordered from the night before and had to sign off on it. And it was like in that moment, it just clicked. And I think the reason is because I had been doing it in like complete isolation. And I had just
Mm.
normalized how bad my behavior had become. And it was like a mirror, I think, in that moment of like,
Yeah.
I saw who I had become. And I like sat in the taxi ride back and I was just like sobbing. And this taxi driver was like, what is wrong with this girl? Um, but I was like, I need to get help. I need to get help. I need to get sober. So then obviously from the February to April, I drank more because I was, I knew the end was near. Uh,
It's funny how that happens just
yeah,
before
exactly.
the
I'm like,
end.
I got to get it all in. And then my, family and I were kind of discussing options as far as how I wanted to get sober. Ultimately, with work and everything, just kind of outpatient therapy made the most sense. And so then April 12th had my last drink.
What was that discussion like with your family? Like, did you have to give them the whole thing? Like,
It was
I had
awful.
this moment of clarity, and now
No, I don't think my mom knew about, oh, maybe I can't remember. I don't
was it
think
your
she knew
mom you
about like,
talked to?
yeah, it was
Ooh,
like very, very
that's
difficult.
serious.
Yeah. But yeah, I was for sure at the bottom. She knew that. I knew that. We
Yeah.
needed a path forward. I was willing enough to admit that I was wrong and
Mhm.
that I needed help and that I couldn't do it all by myself. And I didn't have all the answers, which is hard for me to admit.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm very, very, very lucky and very grateful to have parents that have supported me, through everything.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, sometimes it's hard to have those conversations
Mhm.
because I don't know if this was your experience, but like my parents knew that I was having issues, but me saying it and seeing it in their eyes was so
Yes.
hard.
Yeah.
It made it
It's
very real.
heartbreaking. It's very
Yeah.
heartbreaking.
Yeah, but it sounds
Very
like you had
heartbreaking.
lovely parents that helped you. So you did
Yeah.
outpatient, and was that, I mean, listen, you're a very high functioning person. You have this very successful business. You have I
Mhm.
would consider you very high profile. You have a very large social media following
Mhm.
and people that are really like looking up to you and looking to you for
Mhm.
guidance
Yeah.
and to have to try to get sober while managing all this. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. What
Yeah.
was that period like for you, like trying to manage everything that you were doing and getting sober?
I did go dark on social media, I think for about a month, from April to May or something like that. I kind of alluded I just needed a break from social media while I was kind of just in the initial stages of things. And I
Hmm.
didn't ultimately end up sharing anything with my audience until like September, I believe, of 2021. So almost, I can't do math. How many months is that? Or
A few months.
5 months, 6 months in.
Yeah.
Partially because, at the beginning there is this sense of like, is this really gonna stick? Like, do I really have
Oh,
a problem? Or is this just a blip? Like, what does this mean? And then around September, I, came to terms with accepting a lot of things. And then also, I've always been very honest with my audience about my life and me personally. And I felt such a huge disconnect between like the way I was
mm,
showing up online versus actually what was trying not to bang this table versus actually what was going on in my life at the time. And so I felt
yeah.
like I wasn't being myself online. And it was like this pressure building up simultaneously. My boyfriend and I broke up. So it was like, not
Oof.
only am I going through a breakup with a long, long, long-term boyfriend, and I like am not sharing about my sobriety. I just felt like so inauthentic. So I finally shared about it. And it was like the most terrifying thing I've ever done. Like I recorded all
Yeah.
these stories talking about it, being very honest about my struggles with alcohol. And I literally like shut my phone off and like walked for an hour. And then I came back and it was just like thousands and thousands of messages, not a single negative one. Um, and it was really incredible because I remember, I don't know if you find this to be the case, maybe not now anymore, but in 2021, I was looking for like YouTube videos of women who I could relate to talking about this. And it
Hmm.
was like 50-year-old men mostly, And there
Hmm.
was this one girl in particular, this one YouTuber in particular who was my age, successful, young, and she was sharing about her experience. And it made me feel so much less alone. And
Yeah.
that's when I realized that like that is an impact that I can have on other people is being honest about my story and what I've gone through and like my very human experience and the ripple effect that that can have on other people. And so just seeing that outpouring of support made me like even more excited about continuing to share.
I mean, listen, the courage it must have taken you to do that, and thinking that,
It was horrible.
oh
I
my
was
gosh.
texting like 50 people at once being like, are we sure? Are we sure I should do this? Like,
Yeah.
fuck.
Did you think it was going to affect your business?
Yes, I thought that people wouldn't take me as seriously. I thought that my
Really?
credibility would be out the window. I thought that people would judge me.
Yeah.
And it was really the opposite, which I was very surprised by.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? Our perceptions of what people think is like credible. It's like this is the crazy thing to me. If you're drinking, you're actually less credible in a way because
Exactly.
your mental
Exactly.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like you're under the
Right.
influence. You're not actually in
Yeah.
your full awareness, right? And
Yeah.
somehow we get it twisted thinking sober is the weakness somehow.
Right. Right.
So bizarre.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
bizarre. Yeah, like we're literally mentally incapacitated when we're drinking, but somehow
Yeah, I'm super credible right now.
yeah, and then you say, "Oh, I'm not drinking." Everyone goes, "Oh, she must have a problem." Like we thinking that people are whispering about us, "Oh, she has a
Right.
problem. She's unstable. She's one of
Right.
those."
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's so important that women like you can stand up and say, "I was super high functioning. I was
Mhm.
getting it done
Mhm.
professionally, and I
Yeah.
was suffering. I was
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
suffering."
Yeah, 100%. And that, I mean, that's
Yeah.
the thing is that it doesn't need to be alcohol. It doesn't need to be drugs. I think so many people are
Yeah.
suffering and they're dealing with it through things that like at the surface are not quite as destructive, but it could be like overworking, scrolling social media for 3 hours, like all these behaviors that at the end of the day, you're just trying to numb and distract from what's going on.
Yeah.
So, you can judge me for using alcohol, but like, you're on TikTok for 6 hours a day trying to avoid something about yourself. So, like
Yeah.
we all have something that we need to look at.
Yeah, listen, it's not a contest. We're all
Right. Exactly. We're all messed up in our own special ways.
yeah, we all listen. I have yet to meet someone who didn't have a little something something going on behind
No,
the
everyone
scenes that they're
does.
not talking
Everyone does.
about.
I'm more
Yeah.
terrified of the perfect people, so
Yeah, right. Lies. It's all
it literally
lies.
is.
So
Yeah,
funny.
exactly.
So, when you came to the conclusion that you needed to get help, you needed the outpatient, what was
Mhm.
was it just outpatient? I don't mean just,
By
but you know what I mean? It's like
by
outpatient plus
outpatient, I
therapy
just
or,
mean therapy.
oh, you did
I just mean,
therapy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was
Okay.
entirely through therapy. I used an
Oh,
app
nice.
also called, oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of it. There was like an app that you could do, like you would learn things daily.
Oh, nice. If you
I
think
forget
of
the
it,
name
I
of
will
it.
put it in the show notes. So don't worry
Yeah,
if
I
it
can't
doesn't jump
remember,
to
but I did
mind.
it for like the first 3 months, and every single day they would teach you something new about
Nice.
what was going on in your brain. So I looked forward to that every day. I started journaling every day. I was taking hot baths every single night to like calm down my nervous system, which was like
Yeah.
insane. I literally did that every single night for 3 months. I didn't go
Yeah.
anywhere. Therapy, I had my boyfriend at the time was very supportive. My family was very supportive. So I think all of that, like in combination of therapy, learning about what was going on, honestly isolating. I had to isolate for the first 3 months.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been able to stay sober with like maintaining a social life.
So
Um,
you just, by isolating, you mean you just didn't put yourself in situations where you would feel compelled to drink.
Correct. Which I was working for myself as well. So I was working from home. So basically isolated completely.
So just buried your head and work
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
don't
when you
think I even
say,
went out to dinner for, I remember the first dinner I went out to, I think was around like 90 days, maybe beginning of the fourth month with my ex, and it was an Italian dinner. And I was like, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. And I'm Italian, and so like I'm gonna have a whole thing with red wine and pasta, right? And I just
nice.
like left to go cry in the bathroom like halfway through. But it was like my first
Oh,
dinner out in like 4 months. So yeah, I isolated big time.
what were the tears about? Was it just being overwhelmed by emotion? Was it sadness or,
Yeah, I think it's sadness, it's grief.
yeah,
Um, Red wine for me has always been the hardest one too. So that was like the
yeah,
ultimate trigger.
yeah.
Um, and will it ever feel easier? Will it ever feel better? Which, spoiler
Mm.
alert, it will.
It does. I feel like once you get past things like the first few social events, the first few dinners, when the cravings subside,
Mhm.
that's when things start to get better. And I think there's so much focus in the beginning of what we're losing. There's all that grief,
Mhm.
but then we forget that that's actually the beginning. And then like
Yeah,
this whole new world opens up. What was that? What is the
100%.
when we talk about like the whole new world that opens up, what does that
Mhm.
look like for you?
Yeah. Oh man, where do I begin? I feel like I'm a different person. It is
Yeah.
truly like learning how to be a human being again, of like going through the first of like my first sober wedding, my first sober New Year's, like all these things, but you prove to yourself over time that you can do it. And I think that that's like, that's ultimately where it is. So therapy's helped me realize that like the reason why your confidence and self-worth in that kind of more like active drinking, active addiction, whatever you want to call it, phase is like completely decimated is because you want to be this type of person that doesn't drink. But
Right.
continuously over and over again, you are making the decision to drink. And it's in that gap between like who you want to be and who you are being where your self-worth goes downhill completely. So in sobriety, you're making your actual actions align with your intentions and who you want to be. And so then merging those two things together is what makes you a more confident person and gives you that self-worth. Um, so that's ultimately, I think, what it's come down to for me is like figuring out not only am I not going to drink and I'm making a commitment to that, but I'm also making all these other commitments now to myself that I can actually do because I'm not drinking or hungover all the time. So it's all of those things that just like increase your confidence, allow you to show up in such a better energy and in that like attract so much more to yourself. Your skin will be better, your health will be better, your body will be better, like you'll attract better people, better relationships. Like it's just a
Yeah.
snowball effect, and in every way it's absolutely beautiful.
Speaking of relationships, how did your
Mhm.
relationships change in the beginning?
um
Friendships, romantic,
yeah,
family?
my therapist, I remember at the very beginning, she told me, and I didn't want to hear this at the time, but she was absolutely right, that when you stop drinking and when you start healing, your vibration is going to, your vibration will raise. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? At the time, I was like, not into like any of that. I didn't understand.
Sounds very woo-woo.
Yeah, right. And now I'm constantly like, what's my vibration at today? Anyway, and in that, you will lose lower vibration relationships and people. And unfortunately, like, the relationship I was in, he's a wonderful guy, but it wasn't for me. And I think as I healed myself, that became more and more clear.
Yeah.
So ultimately, that long-term relationship ended, which was definitely for the best. I think my friendships changed. I wouldn't say I lost any friendships, even with the people that like I was drinking the most heavily with, but they changed in the sense that like they became deeper relationships that weren't focused on drinking and alcohol and going out, and kind of allowed us to have like, yeah, more of a deeper relationship. But certainly, I guess there were a couple people where I was like, do I really like hanging out with you if we're not drinking together? Maybe not. Nothing about this
Yeah.
person or anything, but like maybe our relationship did center around like drinking and you were doing me a favor because you were justifying my drinking. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah,
Having those drinking buddies.
exactly.
Yeah, it's an interesting transition to be instead of like going out for brunch, you go do like I feel like the activities change
Oh, totally.
and then the conversations change. It's more about
Exactly.
feelings and what am I learning and how am I growing and what's inspiring me. It's very different
Exactly.
from those, drunken, gossipy. Do you know what I
Totally.
mean?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I'm like, we're going on a walk today rather than drinking 17 mimosas at 10 a.m.
Yeah, no, it's just nice to hear that you can, retain your
Hmm.
friendships. I think there's so much fear
Yeah.
around losing
Hmm.
people
Yeah,
that even the people that you end up leaving your life, they make space for new people who are more in alignment with what you're doing.
exactly. Yeah. And another important point too is that a lot of people, a lot of what I get in my messages is that it's very hard for them to go out because their friends are pressuring them to drink or judging them or making
Yeah,
fun of them. And I think the thing you have to realize in that is that you're not doing anything wrong, but you are a mirror to those people and you are making them feel uncomfortable about their drinking. So more often than not, if somebody's criticizing you not drinking, they have a problem. Because I remember the number of times that I have said in my life, I don't trust people who don't drink. Like if I had $1 for every time I said that,
wow, isn't
and
that
like,
funny?
here we are.
Wow. What's a little self-judgment we have to get over?
Yeah,
It's like, oh, am I trustworthy?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Isn't that funny? Yeah,
Yeah,
the things we say. I
yeah.
want to shift gears a little bit
Hmm.
to like talking about your professional life. You have this amazing business where you help. Is it mostly women?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes,
You're,
yeah.
yeah. Tell me a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. So my company is called Creator Empire, and we basically have courses, resources for aspiring creators that want to build businesses that are not just like on Instagram, but that actually, are cross-platform, that have different revenue streams, and that are ultimately like built to last. So that company was formed because I started as a creator back in 2016. I was a travel and lifestyle creator
So
in New
fun.
York. And yeah, I started in 2016, went full time in 2017. I was working as a travel blogger for a few years, working with like tourism boards and hotels and brands around the world, and built like a multi six-figure business doing that, which was like the dream, obviously.
Amazing.
Like
The
literally,
laptop
yeah,
lifestyle
yeah,
everybody wants.
literally the laptop lifestyle that people think about.
Yeah.
And then I was starting to get like questions from my audience about, how did you do that? And at the time, it's totally different now, but at the time in like 2018, 2019, there were not any courses about like influencer creator
Wow.
courses. So mine was one of the first. And I launched that course then, ended up launching a second one called the Blogger Bootcamp, which is more focused around like growing and monetizing a blog, growing your email list. And then we, a couple of years ago, launched a program about creating an online course. So it's all of our programs are really meant to like help people grow an online presence across different platforms, monetize in various ways, build teams, systems, and something that's actually like you as the CEO, not just like a creator with a hobby.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting about the intersection between women in sobriety and the business world is that, there's a lot of us. It's so interesting to think about like the alcoholic personality type, which can be really
Yeah.
obsessive and like all
Yeah.
in and
Yeah.
um I
A
was
hundred
like, oh my
percent.
God, I totally identify with that total like, I quit drinking a long time ago, but I
Uh,
switched to like a little bit of workaholism, right?
oh, totally. Yeah.
Super fun. It's like
Yeah,
like an
exactly. Exactly.
endless distractions.
Yep.
But it's interesting. I feel like there are so many women in our community who
Hmm.
are they're like either developing like a side hustle. It's like we have all this energy that needs to be channeled,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
And I found myself, I did high tech sales in Silicon Valley for 10 years, but I
Hmm.
always had this desire to do something that was heart aligned. And I
Hmm.
feel like there's a lot of women really wanting to learn more about how to put their passion that's some in alignment with their
Hmm.
purpose in life.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I just, how do you correlate these sort of sober mindset with entrepreneur? I feel like there's a lot of correlations
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, totally. And that's actually one of the kind of breakthroughs that I have had over the last few years is that I have a lot of personality traits. You have a lot of personality traits. People in recovery have a lot of personality traits that are like good and evil at the same time. Like good,
They need to be
good that can
channeled.
exactly correctly because we have very much like all or nothing personalities, which can lead to like building an incredible business, or it can lead to the drinking that we were doing, or
Yeah.
like we are very persuasive and leadership oriented, and people listen to us, which can be manipulative. Or we have like, very resourceful personalities, which can be channeled correctly or incorrectly.
Yeah.
So, it's coming to terms with like, these are my strengths, and I wouldn't change
Right.
anything that I've been through because they've helped me become who I am. And I think also the reason why like there's a lot of women in sobriety that have these channels and are putting their message out there is because like, service is such an important part of recovery and community and all of that stuff. And if, I was doing this in isolation and not sharing with anybody, like I don't know how strong my sobriety would be versus if I was. So I don't know if that answered anything
It
of what your
does.
question
And
was,
no, it
but
really does. And I just think it's so interesting because some of the traits, there's such a double-edged sword. It's like, how do you manage between, so there's like two competing things that happen for me as I
Mm,
am doing my own thing.
yeah.
It's like this need to be of service, but then trying to detach from the
Mm,
outcome or the validation. Like part of me
hmm.
needs the validation because I need to know what's working, what's not working, what are other
Right.
people doing in the space. But then it can
Hmm.
get really convoluted. Like I find that my sobriety has to be really strong. And by sobriety, I mean my relationship with myself, really.
Exactly.
Like staying
Yeah.
grounded to the fundamentals so that I don't get
Hmm.
sucked in for this need for
Hmm.
external validation or fall to like the comparison
Yeah.
trap.
Yeah,
How do you
totally.
maintain
It's
that
like that.
balance?
Yeah, it's like that self-assuredness that like no matter what happens or what's going on externally or online, that like you will be okay type of thing.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, it's funny because I it'll hit me at certain points when things happen in life or in business where I suddenly realize like, oh, I'm okay. When this would have like set me off the rails previously.
Hmm.
And I don't really know why that is. Like, I've done a lot of therapy and a lot of healing
That's
in
probably
sobriety, and
why.
that's probably, what it is I've just
Yeah.
like gotten very aware of and comfortable with my, little traumas and, all this stuff over the years and really healed them and gotten to a place of safety of knowing that like I have all of the answers internally, and no matter
Yeah.
what's going on, I will be okay. But it does hit
Yeah.
you in moments where you're like, oh my God, I would have handled that completely differently.
I
So how do
saw,
I maintain that? It's
yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know. It's just an inner knowing of like detachment almost from the
Yeah.
outcome a little bit, not
Yeah.
like us associating your worth with whatever's going on.
Yeah. No,
It's
that's
easier said than
beautiful.
done.
Yeah, we're all human. I think I
Yeah.
saw a post of yours, I think it was recently where you
Mm.
talked, I think you were talking about fertilizing eggs. Am I
Oh, yeah, I
and then
froze
the
my eggs.
Curtis
Yeah.
if there's yeah. And then the comments you were getting
Mhm.
from, mostly men maybe.
Of course.
Yeah. And I thought, wow, to be able to withstand
Hmm.
criticism that is just so crazy. I mean, social media is so bipolar. Like they love you one
Yeah.
minute and hate you the next. But
Yeah.
um, how did you stay grounded in that moment?
With that, I think it's two things. It's remaining very confident in what you know to be true
Mm.
is the first thing. And the second thing, which is sad, but honestly is very true, is just exposure therapy. Like I like like I've gotten, especially when the comments are just so unhinged and inaccurate
Yeah.
and ridiculous, it's easier to detach. I still have a hard time, of course, with comments that are like a little bit, closer to being accurate or like close to hitting home.
Yeah.
But it's honestly just that, like, at the beginning, a comment like that would have set me off the rails for like weeks. And now I just like don't even
Mm.
register any of it. I'm just like, okay, whatever. I also am very like, quicker on the block of like protecting my online
Ah,
space, protecting my mental space. But it is just, staying very aligned with like what you know to be true and staying strong in that.
yeah. I often wondered if, like, do you have an assistant or somebody that
Mhm.
helps you with your social media that might be able to filter some of that stuff for you?
Yeah, I don't with actually my personal Christina Galbato account. I've tried over the years to have somebody help with social media for my personal account, and it's just very important to me that it feels like me.
Hmm.
For Creator Empire, I do have a social media manager. I know we like filter certain words out, but honestly, it's just like if I see it come up, I'll block, and move on.
Yeah. You like have to be
Yeah.
like Wonder Woman with those bracelets to deflect
Yeah,
all
exactly.
the
Exactly.
insanity. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's a good way to create safety. I feel like it's if you can create safety and remain your authentic
Mhm.
self, then you
Yeah.
can live in those spaces. So tell me, what do you do these days for fun? I know you work a lot and you travel. What are you
Uh,
doing for fun these days?
yeah, oh man, my life right now is a little bit interesting because I'm kind of like traveling all over the place. I would say, oh man, for fun. This question always gets me because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing for fun
You know,
anymore.
it's so funny. It's like those of us who are like total workaholics. I remember my husband's friend stopped by the house one day and he's like, "So, what do you guys do for fun?" And we looked at each
Like,
other and I was like, "What is this fun you speak of?"
yeah, exactly. I'm like, what do I do for fun?
What do I do?
I would say travel's probably,
Oh, okay,
yeah,
traveling.
like I have fun creating content, and that's like a
Yeah.
fun aspect of my job for sure. But I think it just like it's like the basics, Like I love to spend time with friends. I love to check out new restaurants. I love to check out new cafes and like be outside. Travel's obviously a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
So it's basics. Like I wish I could be like, oh, I'm taking pottery classes once a week. I'm just not. I'm just not doing that.
You're very, very creative. It doesn't mean you have to play with dirt. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you being so open and that I love seeing the young women coming up saying, hey, it's okay to live
Mhm.
alcohol free. It's okay to acknowledge that alcohol is causing a problem in your life
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just, being an example of somebody that really breaks the mold, right? Like you're not a
Mhm.
middle-aged guy living under the bridge or
Yeah, exactly.
anyways, we do need to have examples of young women coming up. And so I think your voice
I
is really
agree.
important to show that
I
you
really
can be
appreciate
a
that.
successful professional
Mhm.
businesswoman and be
Mhm.
successful without alcohol.
Yeah, no, I really, really appreciate that. And I need those reminders from other people as well because, every so
Yeah.
often you're like questioning your vulnerability and how much you're sharing. And so, yeah, hearing from you just how much of a difference it makes, it means a lot.
Yeah, it really
I
does.
appreciate that.
And if people are looking to connect with you, I mean, listen,
Mhm.
I was checking out your content and doing my research, and you
Mhm.
have, sounds like such an amazing program. I was like, sign me up. Everybody needs a little
Yeah, a little help
Christina.
online these days. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Where can people, so you have two
Mhm.
Instagram accounts. One is your
Yep.
name and one is
Mhm.
your business name. Is
Yeah.
that the best place to find you, or is there a website that people can check
Yeah.
out your?
Yeah. So if they're looking for kind of the educational content around, growing online and monetizing, I would go to Create Her Empire Instagram or website. But if they want to connect with me or send me a message about sobriety, my DMs are always, always open for that. I'm Christina Galbato on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, it was
Yeah.
so lovely to be able to connect with you today. Thank you
It
so
was
much
so
for sharing
fun.
your story, and I look
Of
forward to
course.
connect with you in the future.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks. One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting odatchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.